thought, wow, he's just the cutest thing. I'm going to marry him. The writing was on the wall. So I said, Tony, why don't you go into business for yourself? And then one day, a lady came in with a little car, and he said, this is a nice little car. What do you call it? And she said, oh, it's called a Toyota. Tony was selling sewing machines at Simpson Sears when I met him. And before we got married, he wasn't doing well selling sewing machines. A friend of ours, Ron Elliott, brother of Carl, and was our best man at our wedding, said, well, Tony, you know, I work for Jim Tubman. I'm his manager. Jim Tubman had his car dealership. He sold Volkswagens at the corner of Maitland and Carling Avenue, where it now holds a McDonald's. And he said, why don't you come? We need another salesman. He said, why don't you come and work for Jim? So Tony thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm not doing very well here. So away he went, and he just loved the automobile business. And then Jim had an opportunity to acquire a Pontiac dealership, and he sold his Volkswagen dealership to a gentleman called Mr. Hyman Besson. He didn't really like working for Mr. Besson. So I said, Tony, why don't you go into business for yourself? I said, what have we got to lose? I always like to consider, if I do something, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? The worst thing that was going to happen would be that he'd have to go back and sell cars for somebody else if it didn't work out with his own business. And so, at any rate, Tony went, he leased a gas station, the Sunoco gas station.
Yeah, in the early days when Elizabeth and Tony first were married, Elizabeth worked at GE, and in those days she didn't earn a lot of money, and yet they would save her salary every week, put her salary away, and that's what enabled them to have some capital to start their business.
And Tony formed a partnership with John Foychuk, who was a master mechanic, who worked for Mr. Besson. And John would fix the cars, and Tony would go in and pump gas and do little odd things, and then come home and change his clothes. And then he'd go and buy cars for resale, and we called that business the Small Car Center. And we did very well with that. And then one day, a lady came in with a little car, and Tony looked after her. And he said, this is a nice little car. He said, what do you call it? And she said, oh, it's called a Toyota. Oh, he said, I never heard of those. And she said, well, I like it. She said, it's a nice little car, suits me well, easy on the gas. So he called the powers that be in Toronto and told them about himself, how he'd like to acquire one of these dealerships. Was there anything available? And the person he was speaking with said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, Mr. Graham, we have a couple of representatives in town now. And if you'd like an appointment with them, I'm sure they'd be happy to go over and see you and discuss you establishing a Toyota dealership. That was the beginning. Years ago, it was a well-known fact that anything that came from Japan was cheap. China, cars, clothes. I mean, that has certainly changed greatly. So when Tony got a Toyota dealership, he was teased about being able to cut your feet on that tin can that you're driving.
In the early days of the business, Tony would work all the time, worked many, many hours.
I remember Mom telling me when I was much younger, he was gone a lot of the time, but you grow up with the business, so it wasn't anything unusual for me. And back when I was younger, the dealerships were closed on weekends, so we always had Mom and Dad on Saturday, Sunday, Friday night. Dad would come home for dinner during the week, so I never felt like the business was taking over from family time, not at all.
When Tony received his Toyota dealership, the first few years were really a struggle because small cars weren't really the in thing in North America. People wanted big cars. Then the oil crisis came.
The war in the Middle East leads to an oil embargo. OPEC countries, along with Egypt, Syria, and Tunisia, have announced a 5% cut in oil production each month until Israel agrees to give up disputed territories. OPEC also raised the price of oil by 70% per barrel.
Once the oil crisis hit, small cars became very popular and big cars became not as popular. It just grew from there.
Drive has come of age. Oh, what a feeling to own a Toyota.
That's the feeling for a car that's been the #1 seller in the world, the Toyota Corolla.
Oh, what a feeling to own a Toyota.
Introducing the 1981 front-wheel drive Toyota Corolla Tercel.
Oh, what a feeling, value and style. Oh, what a feeling, mile after mile. Oh, what a feeling to drive Toyota.
Almost at that time was when Toyota started to offer a broader product range, and so things looked up very well because then they could offer a full range for anybody who wanted whatever, a large car, small car, trucks, SUVs. And I think that was what really took off.
There's never been a better time to own a new Toyota than right now at Tony Graham's.
The Tony Graham brand has become associated entirely with excellence.
I think Tony was very outgoing, very personable, and extremely organized. He was a very, very organized person. And I think that was one of the main strengths that he brought to the business. And very, very hardworking, too, very hardworking.
He had a way with people, as customers, as managers, his clients. His handshake is as good as any autograph on any piece of paper. You didn't need him to sign on a deal, you just needed him to shake on a deal, or just tell you, it's a deal, let's do it.
Oh, he always discussed everything with me. He'd come home from work at night and we'd sit and have a drink, and he'd always discuss the day's business and any problems or challenges, and we'd somehow come to an answer together.
He had previously been at Baseline and Woodruff, operating initially a gas station there and then expanding it to a dealership, and when he outgrew those facilities, said, well, where is the growth? Where will Ottawa be growing in the future? East and west, sure, but south will more and more become a focal point for growth. And the geographic center of the city, the geographic center of this huge amalgamated city, is at Merivale and Hunt Club. And so he selected that location and became the very first automobile dealership on Hunt Club. And now, as you know, it's a mecca for dealerships, competitors, and it is probably the primary, if you will, automotive mile in Ottawa. He believes that the only way you can know what's going on at the floor level in a dealership or in the shop is to walk around and talk to the staff and talk to the customers and meet them personally.
What my father taught me is, yes, our customers come first, but really it's our employees that come first. And they need to be looked after. They need to be respected the way you'd want to be looked after. They need to be heard. And to get to know your employees, to be there for them.
We've had a very good life. The automobile business has just been wonderful to us since we got into it, in spite of the challenges. But that made life more interesting.